Hey, good morning, everybody. Ramani here again, and today we'll begin our first chapter. Okay, as mentioned earlier, I will be following this textbook, The Fundamentals of Corporate Finance by Brealey and Myers, and I will be following this textbook from chapters 1 to 13 uh, for the 3310 course here at Huron at Western University. Okay, so before we start, the first chapter just covers the introduction about like what a firm is and what its goals and governance and the basics, like the very basic understanding of a firm. And there's a bunch of learning objectives here, and you could go through this again. And so, learning objective 1.1. Before we go into what these decisions are, like what exactly is finance and how do we deal with it, right? So, finance or why is money important and why is finance important is, well, we have two kinds of people, right? Like you have a bunch of what do you call the consumer, okay, and these consumers do not have any money, right? So they have no money. And then you have another set of uh, another kind of person. So this is typically, he's also a consumer, but this person has money. Okay, so even though both of you are consumers, but one of you has money and one of you does not have money, and but both of you have consumption needs. You need your car, education, uh, house, food. So both of you consume. Oh, my bad. So both of you consume all these necessities or whatever. So the first person in red might already have a car, might have finished his education, could have bought a house, but and could be 50 years of age. Okay, this person could be only 22, just graduated from university, or was 18, still needs to buy a car and still needs to finish their education and buy a house and everything else in their life. So what happens here? So this person needs money, and this person has extra money to invest because they have already accumulated a bunch of wealth over their lifetime. So in this scenario, the person A, or the red person, lends to the yellow person, and the yellow person promises to, in some sense, pay back the money at a future date. Okay, so you pay back the money, or what is called as the principal, plus you pay something extra, right? Like this extra is some sort of like interest or dividend or whatever, or gift, even if you could call it. For whatever reason, you just pay back something extra, and this is how money works, right? Like, typically, if you know each other within family, this could even be like, I don't know, the parent, and this could be the child. Okay, and here there's no transaction needed, right? Like, and as you get later on in life, older on in life, you kind of support your parents. The child could start um, not lending money, but like sponsoring for the parents too. Right? And this in a non-family environment, or the person typically sends money to a bank. The no, sorry about that. So the person with extra money invests in the bank, and the bank pays them some sort of money, like with interest. Okay, and the person who is the lender, or sorry, the person who is the borrower, receives money from the bank initially, and then promises to pay back at some later time, right, with interest. Okay, and the bank can kind of make some sort of small profit by charging a different rate of interest for lending versus borrowing. And this bank is known as your intermediary. Okay, so this is some sense of like finance or how transactions work in general, and this is a very simplistic understanding of the world. There's a bunch of people, some of you do not have the money, but you still need to consume goods, and many of you have enough money and you already have a lot of goods, and you don't have as much consumption expenses. And so the one with extra money lends to the person who has no money and earns some sort of return. And this interest is dependent on a bunch of different factors, and which we learn throughout the course. So when we get to a firm per se, so here we were just talking about a few individuals. When you try and think about a firm, the same thing can kind of apply. A firm needs to invest in a bunch of assets, right? Let's say if you're starting a coffee shop, you need to buy, first of all, figure out rent your location or buy the location, buy all the coffee, buy all the equipment, buy all the fancy tables and chairs, provide free Wi-Fi for your customers. And these are all investment decisions. So a firm needs to invest in different decisions, and this decision is known as the capital budgeting or investment decision, right? And how to pay for all these sort of investments and all these real assets which you end up acquiring is known as the financing decision. Okay, so these are your first two big decisions which are needed, and these two decisions are typically made by a person called as the finance manager or just a manager. And for investment decision, the first thing about an investment decision is you need to identify good investment opportunities, right? Like you could buy a fancy arcade machine in your coffee shop, but if no one uses that arcade machine, it's not a good investment, right? And different sorts of investment decisions. For example, Tim Hortons in your textbook has some examples of various investment decisions, right? Like Tim Hortons in 2004, they went and purchased a bunch of small coffee shops in the United States and expanded their footprint. So that's an example of an investment decision. In March 2018, they planned a $700 million investment in many of their stores to upgrade and just like revamp the stores, like make it nicer, newer, better, more welcoming to customers. So these are examples of investment decisions, right? And whenever you're trying to account for these decisions, you always think about what future cash flows do these investment decisions bring? When do these cash flows occur? And what is the risk of these cash flows not materializing in the future? And there's different ways of measuring each things, but the financial manager has to keep these three key factors in their mind. And so the overall project's value is greater than the initial investment, then it's kind of an attractive investment. And so whenever you get more than what you put in, like more than what you get invest, typically it's a good project. Okay, and the way you kind of finance these investments is typically, in case of Tim Hortons, a lot of these investments are financed from internally generated funds. So what are these internally generated funds? They're profits which the firm earned in the previous years. So a firm, once they start earning profit, they start building up a cash balance, typically, and a lot of from this cash balance, sometimes money is paid out to shareholders, and a lot of times they're just used to invest in the firm, either maintenance investments or to upgrade the firm or to acquire new assets, whatever. And these internally generated funds are generated from the firm's past profits, right? But typically for a new firm, if you're just starting out as a new venture capital, like let's think of an example as Beyond Meat, right? So Beyond Meat is a firm which sells plant-based food, and just like it's like close to meat in texture and flavor, but not exactly. But it's 100% plant-based. It has sausages and burgers and also a bunch of different options which I'm not aware of, maybe meatballs. So it tries to imitate real beef or turkey, I believe, and just using plant-based, primarily pea and soy protein is my understanding. So they have a lot of investment needs. They're still trying to bring their costs down, and they're still trying to expand and meet a bunch of demand. And so typically when you don't have money, you resort to either debt financing or equity financing. So let's think about a firm again. So a firm has a bunch of shareholders, right? So let me go back to the screen. So you try and think about a firm. So the firm is owned, I don't know, let's say a bunch, like two of you start the firm, right? So you initially start the firm, and then you have a bunch of your family invest in the firm, and now they own a part of the firm. So this is so you and your partner went from owning 100% of the firm to now like, well, you 80% of the firm, and your family owns 20%. And then you still need more money to open your plant, and you went and you go on to TV shows like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, and you get a bunch of wealthy investors, and they who are known as like venture capitalists. Don't worry about these names, knowing these names right away, and there'll be a lot of new terms which you're learning, and but as time goes on, you'll get used to them. So these venture cap, so now your initial ownership reduces to 70%, your family owns 20% or 17%, and this venture capitalist may own the rest remaining like 10% or something like that, right? Like, so I'm just making up these numbers, but as you start going public, as in like as your firm is listed on the stock market, it's listed on the stock market on like New York Stock Exchange, in case of Beyond Meat, then you have a bunch of individual people, right? Like, so you have like a bunch of individuals. Some of them might own only one share, and some of them might own 100,000 shares. And so your firm is owned by you and your partner. So that's your listed share, and the family owns a little bit, and then the venture capitalist owns a little bit more, and the bunch of shareholders own tiny parts of your firm. Okay, so all of these people, including the potential founder, are the shareholders. So what is a shareholder? A shareholder just owns a small share of the firm, right? It could be anything from 0.0001% to maybe 50%, who knows? So these are the shareholders, or they're also known as the owners of the firm together. They're collective owners. So just because you own one share of Beyond Meat does not mean you own Beyond Meat. You own a very tiny fraction, and you invested in this Beyond Meat firm. So you, in a sense, or all these shareholders, in a sense, have invested in this firm or have lent the firm some money, right? So you lent the firm some money, and this firm takes this money. So this firm can be thought of as, let's say, Beyond Meat. This firm takes this money and this invests in, acquires some buildings, some manufacturing plants, you know. It acquires a lot of like maybe some sort of like farm, like and land, and it processes all the wheat or protein or peas, I don't know, and so it takes them, processes them. It has a bunch of office members who are working on like marketing, sales, distributions. It has a bunch of other employees inside the plant. It invests in acquiring the right human capital and making all these decisions, and then finally makes like, I don't know, burgers and sausages and sells it to customers, and they receive the money back. And this money is, the firm earns revenues and profits and whatever, and as these profits grow, the value of the firm grows, and the shareholders can, in some sense, get back their money in such a way. Okay, so this is known as the financing decision. In this scenario, you sell a part of the firm, you sell ownership in these future profits, all this money which you're receiving in the future, you're selling a share of that. Hey, whatever, if I'm receiving $100 in future profits, you could own a part of that. You're entitled as a shareholder to a part of that future earnings and profits because you did lend the firm some money as a shareholder. So this is known as equity capital. Okay, that's equity financing. So debt financing is a lot more straightforward. You instead of this, so this is similar to the bank example over here, but instead of the bank, it's just the firm. Okay, Okay, so replace this bank. With firm. So so the firm is, oh, it's actually a little different. The borrower is the firm. Okay, so the borrower, in this scenario is the firm, can borrow from the bank through debt, or in some scenarios, if you're big enough, you could borrow directly from the investor. Okay, and this person is the investor. And whenever you borrow money, that's known as debt financing. Okay, and the choice between these two, whether to raise money through the bank or by borrowing or by selling a share of future proceeds, is known as capital structure decision. Okay, and that's pretty much your first objective. And so this is the financial manager. He manages all these decisions, acquires assets, gets money from investors, and invests in firm's operations. Okay, and the financial assets are explained here, and that's your first lesson and first learning objective 1.1. I'll see you all in the next video.